Hello friends, and welcome back to my computer screen. It's Tuesday, which means it's time for another Photoshop scrapbooking tutorial. If this is your first time here, hello and welcome. My name is Crystal, and I am super excited that you are all here today because we are jumping into a new tutorial series for the month of May all about layer templates. Now, before we get into the specifics on how to use and create layer templates in Photoshop, the first thing I want to do is to create an introduction video for you guys about layers and clipping masks and how to use both of them within Photoshop Creative Cloud and Photoshop Elements. I've seen a lot of questions out there recently about the differences between the two programs, and for more instruction on these scrapbooking hybrid techniques or digital techniques for Photoshop Elements. Since I have both programs, I'm going to go ahead and include tutorials for both moving forward on these videos, starting with this one. So let's go ahead and jump into today's lesson. Let's start with talking about layers. So within Photoshop and Photoshop Elements, I want you to think of the concept of layers as pretty much the same exact thing as putting together a physical scrapbook project or a traditional scrapbook page. You're going to have your background layer, which could be a patterned paper for a traditional sense, or it could be just a blank white canvas, it could be a photo, but whatever is that bottom layer is your background. Then on top of that, you might put mats for your photos, a photo, some embellishments, some stamping, or some journaling, some like sprinkly puffy bits on there. And each of those elements that you are adding onto your scrapbooking page is a layer on top of another one. In the same way, Photoshop has layers, and there is a space where you can see them all in order, where elements are layered on top of each other. In the same way as a physical product, when you add, let's say, a photo on top of a piece of pattern paper, you no longer can see the pattern paper underneath where that photo is. In Photoshop, layers work the same way. They are elements stacked on top of each other. The cool thing with Photoshop is you can rearrange those layers in order to put different elements towards the back. You can also add filters to them, change colors to your different elements. You can make things more opaque to give them the look of, say, vellum. And there's just so many things that you can do with layers in order to create a project. So let's look at these programs and let me show you guys where you can find your layers and the different ways that you can manipulate them. So let's start with talking about locating the layers panel and the basics of using layers within Photoshop Creative Cloud. So when I open up my Creative Cloud program, on the right-hand side of my computer in the bottom, you can see that there is this square section that is labeled layers. When I have an image open or layers on top of that image, they are all going to show up in that bottom square. Now, if you open your program up and you don't see that section, you can go up to the Windows menu item, or menu area, I guess, drop-down menu, and click on the Layers menu, and that will make it either disappear, which is what just happened for me since I already had it, or reappear. If you're using a Windows computer, you can also press F7 as a hotkey, and that will do the exact same thing. So now I've got my Layers panel, which is what that is called, visible. Once you have it visible, you can toggle it to make the space bigger or smaller depending on your preferences. I like to keep mine right about halfway, and I don't mind scrolling through. But if you wanted to see more of your layers all at one time, you can toggle that bigger if you want. So now let's go ahead and open up a couple of items here. Now I'm going to open up a variety of different items. I have a photo, a background paper, an embellishment, a digital stamp, and a journaling card. So let's get all of those open. And you will see that most of them down in the layer panel, most of them open up as a background. There are two, so the digital chipboard and the digital stamp, that are labeled as a layer instead of a background. And that's just because they're a vector image. So you see the checkboard pattern in the background because the background is technically transparent. But the photo and the journaling cards and the papers, those all open as backgrounds. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of that photo, copy it, and paste it onto this background paper. Once I have it pasted on there, I can go ahead and rearrange resize it to how I want. And now you can see that that photo shows up in the layers panel above my background. So some very basic things that you can do here. If you want to see what it would look like with or without a layer, you can toggle the little eye icon. It looks like an eyeball icon, and that will make your layer visible or invisible depending on what you want. And when you print an item, it will print only the things that are visible. You can also double click on the section in that layer where it's titled, and you can change the name of it. So like I just double clicked on the photo and I changed it to say photo. That'll make it a little bit easier for me later to find the layers that I want to move or hide or alter in some way. So next I'm going to grab this digital stamp. I used the journaling card to recolor it before moving it onto this canvas. Then I am going to move that below the photo. So this is what I mean when I say that you can add these layers on top of each other and then you can move them around. But you see that the words or that digital stamp is above my photo, so you can't see the photo where the stamp is touching it, where the image of the stamp is touching it. And then I just showed you that over in that layers panel, you can see that the Facts and Feelings stamp is above that photo layer. So next what I'm going to do here is create a text box. So I want there to be a white space where I can add text on top of it so that it won't blend into my photo. So I just selected the rectangle tool, I made it white, and then I made a selection, I just eyeballed it, where I can put my text. So now that rectangle is now also a layer. So when you add things like text boxes or shapes or even adjustments to your photos, those all become layers, separate layers on top. So I labeled that something different so I could find it more easily later. And right now it is on top of the Facts and Feelings. So the stamp is going behind where that rectangle is. Next, I'm going to add a text box. So this is where I would do my journaling for, my page that I'm creating. And the text box is now its own layer and it is above the rectangle. So I can move the text without moving the rectangle if I so choose. Finally, I'm going to bring over this embellishment. This is the topmost layer. I'm going to stick it on the photo where I think it would look good. And now you can see down below, I think I'm going to relabel that embellishment or something to that extent. And you can see now that all of these layers are listed out in that layers panel. So you've got the background, the photo, the digital stamp, the rectangle box, the text for journaling, and the embellishment. So if you were building this on an actual real physical page, it would look much the same. You just wouldn't have them listed out on a menu next to you. So since that layer is at the top, I just showed you guys that if I were to bring it down, it would still be on top of all of the other elements. That is the topmost layer. Now let's talk about rearranging these. So you can click on any layer and hold it and drag it above or below different elements, and that will make it come to the front or move to the back of all your layers. So for this one, I wanted that Facts and Feelings digital stamp to be on top of my text. Now I moved it all the way to the top. So if I were to take that, bring on the next chapter embellishment and move it down, it would now be behind the text, behind that digital stamp. I will ultimately put it back on the top though, just because. And then I'm going to go down that layers panel and click on the white rectangle layer, and I'm going to change the opacity. I want it to be a little bit more see-through. So once I have it clicked on, I am going to go into the menu items in the middle where it says opacity at 100%, and I am going to change that to, I think, around 75%. And then you'll see that that made the rectangle a little bit see-through to where it almost mimics vellum. So that is a trick for how you can make these layers more see-through. And the more or the less opaque it is, the more you can see through to the items below it. So another fun thing that you can do with these layers is to group them, which actually makes them a lot easier to find and manipulate within Photoshop as well. So what you want to do is down in the layers template, you want to select the layers that you want to group. Once you have those layers selected, you're going to right click on them and then go up to the top where it says group from layers. You can then rename your group. So I'm going to name mine journaling box or journaling block and hit OK. And once that happens, it's going to form kind of like a folder section where you can toggle the arrow next to it and the layers will show below that. And what's nice about grouping them in this way is that you can double click onto your text box and edit your text box or edit your rectangle, whatever you want to do, but those items are grouped together. And then in your layers panel, you can move them as a group up or down in order to change where they are on your page. Once you have your group created, you can also toggle the arrow down and then you can drag another layer into the group and add it to that group as well, just by placing it inside the group wherever you want it to go. So just some really cool techniques for making your layers panel a little bit easier to look at and easier to manipulate if you have things that you specifically want to go together, but that you also want to still be able to edit. If you no longer want those items to be in a group, you can right click on the group folder and go up to ungroup items, and it will put everything back into your layers panel and outside of a group. A very similar technique to grouping layers is merging layers, which is something that you can do by starting the same way. So selecting the layers that you want to merge together, right-clicking on those layers and selecting merge layers. The difference for this is that once your layers are merged, they become one layer instead of a folder of multiple layers. So these are now one layer, and it is no longer editable in their separate components. So like I cannot edit that text anymore now that it's merged. There are some benefits to merging though. A major benefit is that you can, if I wanted to take a piece from this setup right here, copy it and paste it onto a separate document to print, it will only copy over the layer that I have selected. So if I wanted this entire image to be transferred onto a different page to be printed, I would have to merge down all of the layers and then I could copy it and paste it over. And then it would be, I wouldn't be able to move any of the things around. So there are some benefits to merging layers that are different than merging or than grouping them together. So some other things that you can do, you can duplicate layers. So if I wanted to duplicate, like I'm going to duplicate this facts and feelings stamp, I can right click on my layer and select duplicate layer. It will allow me to type in a different name if I want. And then you can do fun things. Like for this, I recolored the second one black, and then I can use it as an offset to create a more dimensional title like this. I can also, once it's on there, I can move the original layer above the duplicate, and that will bring the red to the front instead of the black to the front. So it's just ways that you can play with having copies of different layers. This also works if you wanted to create a second text box or anything like that. So you can easily duplicate the layers in that way. You can also delete the layers. So if I right click on the layer I no longer want to have, I can go up to the top and select delete layer, and that will delete it. You can also just highlight it in your layers panel and hit the delete button. That works too. So you can have them there or you can not. And I just hit the undo button because I actually liked it with the black offset right behind it. There are some cases too where you might want to create a completely new layer that is transparent or blank. Think of this as like a piece of acetate. So what you can do is go to the menu, the little menu section. I think that's called like a hamburger or something when it's like a bunch of lines. Anyway, it's a little menu button, and the very top selection is create new layer or new layer. So when I created it, I renamed it new. And one reason that you might want to just create a blank layer is it's a great way to use brush files. So I'm going to go into my brushes now and just pick out a random one and show you guys that what I can do is with that new layer selected, I can use my brush tool to create a stamp, let's say, or let's call it. And then I can take that stamp and I can move it around on the page. If I were to use a brush stamp on a photo layer or on the background layer, once I click the brush or I use the brush, it becomes part of the layer that I'm using it on and would not be editable. But if I use it on a blank layer like this one, it works just like a stamp and I can move it around and resize it and do all the things with it. So it's really a pretty cool way to use elements like that on your pages. So that's going to cover our basics for layers within Photoshop Creative Cloud. Now that we've worked through this page on this program, let's go ahead over to our Photoshop Elements program, and I will show you how to put together this exact same page within Elements. Within Photoshop Elements, you are going to be able to do all of the same things that we just did in Creative Cloud. First, you need to start in Expert mode, which is up at the top of the screen within the photo editor portion of Elements. Then what I'm going to do is open up all of those same files that I had in Creative Cloud, so all of the different types. Now down in the bottom left-hand corner, there is an icon that says Photo Bin. If you click on that, you will be able to see all of the files that you currently have open. Now on the right-hand side is your Layers panel. So that is the exact same thing as we had in Photoshop Creative Cloud. And similarly, you can hide or show that menu by going up to the Windows drop-down menu and selecting Layers. So it's going to do the same thing as in Creative Cloud. So next, I am going to select my photo. So I select all, copy it, and I will paste it onto that background paper. For all of you who don't know, you can use Control-C or Control-A to select all, Control-C to copy, and Control-V to paste, which is what I will be doing for the rest of this. But if that is out of your comfort zone, you can also go up to the Select drop-down menu and select all. And then in the Edit menus, you will find the Copy and Paste items. So you can do that from there too. So now that I have this photo pasted onto the background paper, you can see over in the Layers panel that the photo went on top of the background in the Layers column just like it did inside of Creative Cloud. So next I went over to this journaling card that has that orange color, and I used my eyedropper to pick up the orange color so that I could then switch over to my paint bucket, go back to this Facts and Feelings stamp, and change the color of the stamp to that reddish color. I copied it and pasted it onto this document, and as you can see, it automatically pasted it on top of the background. I must have had the background layer selected. So I did have to move the layer. Just like I did in Creative Cloud, I just selected the layer and dragged it up above the photo layer and positioned that onto this page where I wanted it to go. Similar to Creative Cloud, if you right-click on the layer that you want to duplicate, you can select the Duplicate Layer menu item there, and it will duplicate that layer for you. I changed the color to the black. I'm going to take that black and drag it down behind the orange color, and then I can select the orange again and just adjust it a little bit to the right, and so we've got that offset back again as well. So these layers are stacking up very much the same as they did before. Next, I'm going to grab this embellishment. I will copy it and paste it onto the picture. I'm just going to go ahead and get that out of the way. Again, I had my background layer selected, so because that's where I had clicked, when I pasted in the embellishment, it went behind the photo. So I did have to drag and reposition that layer to be above the photo, and then I could position the embellishment on the page where I wanted it to go. Next, I'm going to create that text box like we had from before. So I'm going to go over to the rectangle tool or the shape tool, and then down in the menu there's like a bunch of different shapes. So I just selected the rectangle and then I drag and dropped it where I wanted it to go. Then on the layers panel, if you go to the very top, there's an opacity. So I changed it to 100% so you could see that, and then I'm going to change it back to that 75 just to give it the little bit of opaqueness. Then I can drag that layer down below and put it behind those facts and feelings titles. I'm going to do the same thing for my text box. So I clicked on the text tool, I selected an area in order to put my text. I'm just gonna like type a bunch of stuff in here just to make it look like there's a bunch of text in there. And then that is all set. Now, when I did my text box, I had the shape selected. So when I put the text box in there, the shape went directly, or that layer went directly above the rectangle, which is perfect because then it's still behind the facts and feelings titles. So now we've got all of the same layers on this page. So let me show you how we can do a lot of those same manipulations as before. So we're going to be able to do almost all of the same manipulations except for, I think, one. So the one thing that Elements cannot do that Creative Cloud does do are form those groups, those files, the file type format where you've got the groups that are listed inside of it and you can move the whole group or manipulate that all at once. So inside of Elements, you can't do that. But everything else we can. So the first thing I did there was I went ahead and I renamed all of my layers just to make them easier to work with. Next, what I'm going to show you guys is if you go up to a layer, you can toggle the eyeball, so that same icon as before, in order to show or hide different layers. Now, this is something I didn't show you guys in Creative Cloud, but you can do the same thing. When there is that background layer down at the bottom, when it is listed as the background, there's nothing you can do with it. It just stays there. However, if you click the lock box on the far right-hand side, it will unlock that layer and turn it from a background into a layer. Then you can move it, adjust it, do whatever you want to it. And then if you go up to layer, you can say create or layer new, and then you can say create layer from background, and it will turn it back into a background again. Similarly to Creative Cloud, you can also create a new layer by going to the hamburger menu drop down up in the upper right hand corner of the layers panel. It's right next to the garbage can, and select create new layer. From there, you can use that to use your digital brushes in order to create stamps and things like that. I think the only thing I didn't show you is that you can also delete your layers by either clicking on them and hitting the delete button, or you can right click on them and select delete layer. Either way will work. So that is how layers work. Oh, there it is right there. That is how layers work within Elements. So very much the same as Creative Cloud, with the only difference being really that you can't create groups. So next, let's talk about clipping masks. So what are clipping masks? Clipping masks are essentially a group of layers where the visibility of that layer is determined by the shape underneath it. So, or by the bottommost layer of that group of layers. So you can use clipping masks in order to take an image and define the shape of that image based on whatever's underneath it. For example, you can create a rectangle space and then clip your image into that rectangle, and the only part of the image that will be visible is whatever is inside of that rectangle, if that makes sense. You can also have multiple images inside of one space. So you can have multiple images clipped to one shape, which I will show you a little bit later. And inside of that clipping mask, you can still move around the different layers to show different portions of your image if you like, or you can merge all of the layers together in order to make that one shaped image the thing that you can, that you're moving around on the page. So let's jump into Photoshop so I can show you, because it might be easier to see rather than to hear what these clipping masks are. So let's start inside of Creative Cloud. For this tutorial, I am going to use this 01 stamp set right here in order to show you guys how I can clip an image into that shape, that exact 01 number shape. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up an image that I like. I have this one that's full of a bunch of color, and I just think that would be super fun. So I'm going to select all of the photo and then go back over onto the stamp set and paste it directly onto that stamp. Then I can sort of kind of position it where I want, and then you can see that I've got the stamp layer and the photo layer stacked on top of each other. So now I am going to right click on the photo layer and select Create Clipping Mask. What that's going to do is it's going to take the photo and it's going to clip it into the shape underneath it, so that the only part that is visible on that shape or on the photo is exactly what is covering the shape below it, if that makes sense. So these are now still separate layers, right? So I can select the photo layer and I can move it wherever I want it to go. I can make it bigger, I can make it smaller, to where the exact section of that photo that I want inside that shape is inside that shape. Just like that. So now, what if I wanted to print, to take that 01 and print it on a page? If in this form, if I was to select all and copy it and paste it on here, it's literally just going to paste that photo onto my canvas. So in order to get it into a movable format, I'm going to select both layers and merge those layers together. Now, if I copy it all and paste it all, it is going to paste over inside that shape that I created, just like that, which is super cool. Now I can go back over to my original clipped stamp and I can just hit the undo button in order to unmerge them if I chose, like if I wanted to change this up and make it look different. But that is how you can, combine these elements, clip an image into a shape and merge them down in order to make that shape what you can use to move around. So let's go back over to the stamp set. I am going to unmerge them. So I'm just going to Control Z or undo. So now they're back to being two separate layers again. Now, here's something else cool that you can do with clipped images. You can actually clip multiple images into one space. So here I just copy and pasted that same picture again, so a second one of it. And then I right clicked and selected Create Clipping Mask, and it clipped it into the same shape on top of the original layer. So now I can move that layer around to get it to where I want it to go and work with it like that. So it's just another fun technique that you can do with clipped images. So that is how clipping masks work within Photoshop Creative Cloud. Now let's go ahead and switch over into Photoshop Elements so I can show you how to use clipping masks within that program. So with Photoshop Elements open, I am going to do the same thing as before. Again, we're in that expert mode, so I pretty much do everything in expert mode. I'm going to open up the same shape from before, the 01, and the same image. So again, I will copy or select all, copy it, and paste it on top of the original layer here. Right click and select Create Clipping Mask. So it works exactly the same way. Again, you can move the image underneath it. One difference with Elements is that if you want your image underneath to stay to scale, you do have to use the corner boxes to resize it instead of the sides. With Creative Cloud, it does stay to scale if you alter the shape based on just like one of the edges versus the corners. But inside of Elements, you do have to use a corner one in order to keep it to scale. So it's not like warped or anything. Then you can position it wherever you want it to go. If you want to copy it and paste it onto a different canvas, you will need to merge those layers together just like we did in Creative Cloud. So you just want to select both of the layers and then right click on them and merge the layers together. And now you've got the one section that you can move around, the one layer that you can move around and copy and paste onto a different canvas. Like here, I'm just going to paste it onto the photo so you can see. Whereas before, if I tried to copy and paste it, it would do the entire photo and not the photo inside of that shape. So one other thing that I want to show you on here is an example of how you can use just a regular old shape through the Photoshop program in order to clip an image to it. So all I'm doing is selecting the shape tool. This also works on Creative Cloud. So I created a rectangle. I'm going to copy and paste that image onto here, and then I will clip it into that rectangle. So now you can see, whoops, I forgot to switch over to my move tool. Now you can see that I have that image clipped into a rectangle space as well. So this works for any of the shapes that is within this program. I hope that this gives you a pretty good overview of how to use layers and clipping masks inside of these programs, because these two concepts are going to be really important for working with layer templates. Next week, I will be teaching you guys some basics on how to actually use layer templates that are pre-designed in order to create scrapbook pages. So I hope I will see you guys next week for that tutorial. If you have any questions about the content from today, please let me know in the comments down below. Make sure to like this video if you enjoyed this content and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Until next time, I hope you have a fantastic day and I will catch you in the next video. Bye now.